Hello everyone, this is Somaya from 12th House Revelations, and I welcome you to the realm of the unconscious, dreams, and everything related to Psyche. And in this realm, I hope to bring consciousness to the sacred art of soul making. And since I'm obsessed with Venus and everything Venusian, and I consider myself to be the most Venusian Saturnian, in this video, I wanted to analyze one of my favorite myths, and that is the myth of Eros and Psyche, where Venus / Aphrodite plays a key role and initiates Psyche. And I will use the name Eros in this video instead of Cupid or Amor, which are various names that have been given to this marvelous god of love and desire. But in my personal opinion, these two names have been so drastically degraded and stripped of their dignity to the level of cheesy Hollywood movies and Valentine's cards and Valentine's Day. And don't get me wrong, I love Valentine's Day, but I prefer to stick with Eros. And my motivation for these videos is that you will hopefully feel inspired to go on a quest yourself and start rereading myths and fairy tales and feel your way through them in your own unique way. There is not just this one way to interpret or understand these tales. And in this video, I will analyze this myth through a Jungian lens. However, just because I prefer the work of Dr. Jung and the Jungian way, because Dr. Jung speaks a language close to my soul, and I feel so inspired by him, it does not mean that this is the only correct way of understanding. There is no dogma and no right or wrong when we work with myths and fairy tales and dreams. It's not a religion. So the story of Eros and Psyche can be found in Greek art. However, the complete myth is collected or brought to paper in a Roman novel written in the 2nd century. And it is a tale within a novel. The reason I felt very drawn to make this video about the myth of Eros and Psyche is that, in my opinion, it is highly educational and insightful for the feminine psyche. And of course, the first time that I read it, I was thinking to myself, wow, Aphrodite, this is the goddess of love, really? However, later, because, in this myth, we are meeting this wrathful side of Aphrodite. However, later I understood that Aphrodite, she is initiating, this goddess is initiating Psyche, who was beyond words beautiful but dangerously innocent, and she had to become whole within herself before she was united with the son of the goddess Aphrodite externally, with Eros. So before the alchemical marriage can occur, we have to fulfill certain tasks. We have to go through the nigredo stage and the different alchemical stages and mature. And for the ancients, there was not this split in the collective psyche that this goddess Venus / Aphrodite is only the goddess of love and beauty. Which brings me back to our definition of love. If we only focus on the nurturing and joyful and beautiful and harmonious side of love, we will be very disappointed and we will always remain immature. But for the ancients, wholeness was understood, and that this goddess Aphrodite could at the same time be wrathful and jealous, and I believe our modern definition of love is only focusing on the nurturing and harmonious aspects of love. As I said, this idea that love will make me forever happy, and once I find love, then I am forever happy, this happily ever after. And what does that mean anyway, this happily ever after? This is, being unconscious and being in the Garden of Eden and just being always happy. There is no growth possible if you're always happy. You know, there is not much growth that is taking place. And love isn't either or, you know, it's both and it is destructive as well as constructive, and it will destroy us. Love will destroy us, and will destroy anything that is no longer serving us. And we have to die in love, as we learn in Sufism. And if we truly love, you know, the parts or the nafs has to be completely destroyed. That is the ego. And I'm not against the ego, you know, go and watch my videos on the anima and the animus. But we are, you know, we need the ego. But I'm not going to go into the details here. But you can watch the beginning of my animus video where I talk about a healthy ego and that it is needed. However, love will destroy all the aspects of us that are no longer serving us, and so that we can be reborn. You know, the soul must be purified in the falling and rising in love. And it is interesting that in the English language we fall in love. So we are alchemically initiated in love, where fears are faced, the shadows, you know, that is in the Nigredo stage. And these stages are not linear, you know, it's always cyclical, and it's spiral. It's you know, sometimes you feel like it's never ending. It's spirals within spirals, cycles within cycles. And in the Nigredo stage, we face our fears, we face the shadows. That is the blackening stage in alchemy, or what is more collectively known as the dark night of the soul. And we are purified in the fires of love and are turned into white ash, which happens in the albedo stage, the whitening stage. And then in the rubedo or reddening stage, we are reborn with a new level of consciousness. And this is just a short, brief summary or explanation on the alchemical stages. There's also the Citrinitas stage, and I could talk about this for hours, but this is not the topic here. Maybe I will make a video about the alchemical stages and the Jungian way of understanding them. So during the Greek and Roman antiquity, Aphrodite represented both light and dark characteristics. She was not just this beautiful light image that we collectively have of Venus, you know, which is influenced by Botticelli's The Birth of Venus. So to the ancients, Venus or Aphrodite was both light and dark. And you surely didn't want to piss her off, you know, or offend her. And I will say it again, that I'm speaking of femininity in women as well as in men. And of course, a woman will probably feel more connected to this myth, since her prime psychological quality is femininity. Yet it will also speak to the anima within the man's psyche. And I believe that working with dreams, myths, fairy tales is imperative if we want to understand Psyche's logic. Because Psyche, as I said in my other videos, Psyche doesn't speak human language. It doesn't speak English or German or Chinese, but she communicates with us or to us in symbols, you know, with symbols, images, dreams, through myths and fairy tales, and that's what makes connecting with her such a high adventure. It's not this linear, logical, Apollonian way of approach. It's when we start to think mythologically, we need to remember to allow the myth to flow through us and immerse ourselves in its symbolism and imagery, because myths are living principles. And the same is true for working with dreams, but we will talk about that in another video. And if you follow me on Instagram, you will know that I'm all about dream work and the Neptunian realms. But I believe that dream work deserves its own video, because it's just, you could talk about it for 10 years and decades, it's never ending. But back to our video, or our myth, and or the introduction. We won't decipher and decode Psyche with a sharp mind and with the principles and laws of logic. So allow yourself to relax and listen with that part of you that softens and is activated when it hears "once upon a time." The tale of Eros and Psyche starts with the line, "Once there was a kingdom." This indicates that we will be taken into a realm that represents our inner world, for the kingdom can be understood or interpreted as the inner realm which our modern rational mind does not often journey to. For in our modern day, we're usually all about the external, even though slowly a shift is happening collectively. The tale continues. In this kingdom, a king lived with his queen and 3 daughters. The 3rd daughter is Psyche, which literally means soul. Here we get a hint that she will take us on a journey to the inner realms. Also, the number 3 is another important hint. I made several posts about the meaning of numbers in fairy tales and myths on Instagram. You can find them in my story highlights. I will not go into the depth here, for it would make the video too long. But if you're interested in numerology, I would highly recommend Manly P. Hall's book, The Sacred Magic of the Kabbalah. A Psyche, despite being a mortal woman, was so beautiful, she is described as otherworldly beautiful in the myth, that the people in this kingdom began to worship her instead of worshipping the goddess Aphrodite, who had reigned from the very beginning, before time itself. The people of this kingdom started saying, Psyche is the new goddess of beauty, love, and truth, etc. And they stopped worshipping the goddess and didn't go to her temple anymore. When Aphrodite found out about this, she was of course outraged. How is it possible that a mortal woman would replace the goddess of beauty and love? Humans were neglecting her temples for a mere mortal woman. And I believe that here we see that the gods and goddesses need us humans just like we need them. It's not just this one-sided relationship, And in her anger, Aphrodite came up with a plan and decided that her own son Eros had to go to Psyche and make her fall in love with the ugliest and most awful creature possible, Death himself. Now, before we carry on with this tale, let us explore the origins of both Psyche and Aphrodite, because the way they were both born is in stark contrast to each other. Aphrodite, this goddess, she's born of the sea after Cronus, the son of Uranus, severed his father's genitals and threw them into the sea, and the water was fertilized by this act. I love this imagery. It's fantastic. And symbolizing love emerging from the depths, she arose from deep waters and blessed the land as grass and flowers were blooming where she had stepped. Psyche, on the other hand, is said to have been conceived by dewdrops that fell from the sky. Isn't that amazing? I just love it. Now let us explore the symbolism in this. Aphrodite, being born from the sea, symbolizes this oceanic, primordial, ancient goddess that rules the unconscious and is beyond time. And as we all know, water is a symbol of the unconscious. And she cannot be approached by everyday, ordinary consciousness. And trying to understand her that way is similar to trying to control a stormy ocean. She will destroy you, She will destroy you and you will drown in her deep, dark waters if you approach her with your ego consciousness. And every woman has this archetype living within her psyche, who is this majestic yet overwhelming and somehow unrelatable archetype. And in this myth, it is the task of Psyche to soften this great ocean of feminine power and to relate to her. So somehow they're like both Psyche and Venus or Aphrodite, they're initiating each other. I never thought about this, but because I always thought Venus is initiating Psyche, but somehow it is Psyche is also initiating Venus. I don't know. I never thought about this, but back to your myth. The mirror is a symbol often associated with the goddess Aphrodite. While on a surface level of understanding, one could relate that to vanity, since there's also this very interesting story about Aphrodite, that she has this servant who has to carry a mirror before her so that the goddess of beauty can constantly see herself. Another way of understanding it is that it is symbolic of how this goddess provides us a mirror in which we can see ourselves, and pull back our projections, which happen automatically, and there's something beyond our control. We cannot control our projections. However, we can become conscious of them. And with her mirror, we can learn to discern when we are giving another person our shadow or our inner gold, our own divinity and beauty, our golden shadow. When we start observing what life is mirroring back, we can begin to understand our projections and our own inner material that we are freely giving away, and we will see that what life mirrors back is mostly our own projection. And that is why Venus is having this servant around her who holds up this mirror in front of her. And oftentimes we are more afraid to see our own gold and divinity and beauty and gifts, and prefer to burden another person to carry that golden shadow. And oftentimes this happens in love, when the other person becomes godlike for us, and we project all those divine qualities onto them. And in this tale, Aphrodite initiates Psyche so that she is able to find her own immortality and goddess self. From being a mortal woman, she becomes this goddess, and she sees all these aspects in herself after she hopelessly falls in love with Eros, which is the animus. And what this goddess does when it operates within the feminine psyche is that it pulls us in the deep waters of the unconscious, while simultaneously forcing us into the world of consciousness to fulfill her tasks and start the journey towards wholeness, and make her unconscious forces that run our lives, make them conscious. So when it comes to the younger expression of the feminine in the form of Psyche, we move from the vast oceanic proportions of Aphrodite, this ancient goddess born from the sea, to a being who was created when dewdrops fell on the land. Now you compare these two images. It's amazing. First you have the ocean, and then you have dewdrops. And so this young, beautiful, but dangerously innocent and immature girl is worshipped for her beauty, yet she is not courted, and no man will approach her or marry her. That's what we learn in the tale. And I'm sure we can all connect to Psyche in this lonely stage, where the world does not understand us and everyone keeps their distance from us, and we feel alien. There is no equal give and take relationship, and we remain unrelated to. A famous example for this would be Marilyn Monroe, who was admired for her beauty and, Yet she had a hard time finding people who really related to her as a person, and were not just admirers of her beauty, external beauty. And a woman like this seems unapproachable to others, and people will worship her but don't want to be in deep relationship with her. So it's a very lonely experience, and life will become unbearable and intolerable in a case like this. So, however, when this is made conscious, we can begin our journey of evolution, like Psyche, towards wholeness. Our journey towards wholeness. In our myth, while the two older sisters of Psyche are happily married, the queen and king are deeply in despair because no man wants to marry their youngest and most beautiful daughter. So what does the king do? What a king does in a situation like this. A king will consult an oracle for guidance. What the king is unaware of, however, is that the oracle is under the rule of Aphrodite, who has given her instructions beforehand for a gruesome prophecy. Poor Psyche is to be married to the most horrible creature, which is death. And since oracles were not to be doubted in ancient times, the king and queen accept this dark fate, and even though they're grieving, they chain their youngest and most beautiful daughter to a rock, and in some versions she's tied to a tree, at the top of the holy mountain, and thus prepare her wedding, which is a funeral at the same time. Now, they all cry bitterly and curse fate, but the sacrifice must be made, and Psyche also is in full surrender. She accepts her fate. Which I think is also very important, to this surrender aspect of her. She's not fighting against her fate. She's in full acceptance, and she's ready to be initiated. Now, there's great symbolism in this whole thing, this dual aspect of marriage, where an old part of us dies. And many marriage costumes worldwide reflect this, and many wedding costumes are remnants of funeral ceremonies from ancient times, which is very interesting. And also the symbolism of the holy mountain, it's not in the forest, which is also the unconscious, or it's not in the desert, but the top of the holy mountain. And mountains symbolically provide passage from one plane to another, as they are the highest point of the earth, the meeting place in the clouds of heaven and earth. The mountain represents the earth and the feminine, with the sky, clouds, thunder, and lightning as the masculine. And on the spiritual level, a mountaintop represents ascent from the limited and partial to the whole, as we learn in this tale. So carrying on her plan to destroy Psyche, Aphrodite asks her son Eros to make Psyche fall in love with death. And Eros, in my understanding, he has a mother complex himself, as we will see in this myth. And in the beginning of the tale, he's still under the rule of his mother, but in the end, he also learns to stand up for his love for Psyche and to fight for it. Eros, however, in the beginning, he is obeying his mother, and he is the god of love and desire. And what I think is a beautiful reminder is that he is not simply related to sexuality, as his arrows are always aimed at the heart, not the genitals. And back to our tale. Aphrodite asks this sun god of love to go down and make Psyche fall in love with the repulsive, ugly beast of death, hoping that she gets rid of her competition this way. Eros obeys and goes down to Psyche, yet at her sight, an accident happens, and he pricks his finger on his own arrow and ends up falling in love with Psyche, who is still tied to the rock. Eros then decides to take Psyche as his wife, frees her from the rock, and takes her from the holy mountain where she should meet Death, her husband-to-be, down into a valley of paradise. But Aphrodite doesn't know this, so this all happens in secret. And what happens there in the Valley of Paradise, that will be explored in the next video, because this has been longer than I wanted it to be. However, I thank you for listening, and 13 blessings.